Good morning. I'm so excited to be here today and speak with you about Indigenous skills, methods of learning from nature. My name is Linda Voith. I'm coming to you from Belfast, New York, in New York State, Western New York State, south of Niagara Falls. First, I want to ask you a question before we get started. I want to know, do you believe that the actions of one person make a difference? Just go ahead and write that in the chat. Give me your vote, what you think. Okay, great. Now, here's where I'd like to start. I want to know how much you currently know about nature, about your local surroundings and the resources that sustain you. So this is a self-quiz. Nobody's going to see it but me. I just want you to take out a pen and paper or write it in the notes on your phone. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I just want to know at the end how you did. You can just kind of give me a thumbs up or down, that's all. So here we go. Can you name 5 common birds in your area? Do you know what kind of noise they make when they're happy? How about when they're alarmed? Do you know what that sounds like? Do you know where they sleep at night? Where is the nearest bird's nest from the place where you currently reside? Do you know which local plants that are native to your area that grow wild are edible or medicinal? Do you know which direction the wind blows when it's about to rain? Not the prevailing winds, but the winds when it's about to rain. Now, if you get a heavy rainfall, I'm wondering, where does that water run off? I know it goes down into a drain, but where does that drain lead to? Where does all your wastewater drain to? What natural body of water? Do you know where your drinking water comes from? What's the natural source? How much of the food that you ate today was local, locally produced? And where did the rest of the food come from? Where were the building materials that made your home? Where did they come from? How far away? Can you name several animals that live in your area? Do you know what tracks they make? And if you saw those tracks, could you tell if the animal was running or walking? Okay, so how'd you do? What do you think? Do you feel foolish? I know I did when I first took a test like this. Even though I've spent a lot of time in nature in my life, I really didn't know my local area. I didn't know the birds and the animals. I mean, they're my neighbors, right? And I don't know anything about them, or I didn't at the time. Until I learned how to study nature through Indigenous teachings. And I'm talking about Indigenous people from my area of the United States, the northeast of the United States. And this is the home of the Haudenosaunee people who lived around the Great Lakes, one of the largest bodies of fresh water in the world. So we know that these native people, they needed to know all of these things and much, much more. Because, right, their survival depended on it. They had to know where the food was. They had to know where they could build shelter, What if their house blew down? They had to know how to rebuild it really fast. I mean, it's cold here. I don't know about in a tropical place what the survival priorities are between water, shelter, food. But in the United States, the priority is shelter. If you don't have shelter, you could die overnight from exposure at some times in the year, even pretty warm times. So the native people, they had to know all these things. Where could they get building materials? Where could they get fuel to burn in their fire? Which kind of woods would light really fast, and which kind of woods would make a coal that would last all night? They needed to know this stuff. They also needed to know things like what the birds were saying. How did they know what the birds were communicating about? Well, they sat and studied in nature for a long, long time. In fact, the native people had scouts. These were people that didn't live in the village. They lived outside the village in the woods, and their job was just to study nature. Just to be able to find out where the food was coming from, what the dangers might be, and to warn the people and to guide them. And this was their method of providing for their community. They were the support network. So they also knew what the birds were talking about, and that was important because they could tell if somebody was sneaking up on them, another tribe that wasn't friendly. They could tell if there was a predator coming. They could tell that the birds were active, there was food somewhere. They knew how to read the language of the birds and the animals just by their tracks. So native people, they studied the animals, and they would do something. They would try to figure out what the medicine of each animal was. That meant, like, what was the intrinsic skill of that particular animal? And they would study that and try to figure out if they could learn something from those animals. So for example, the eagles and the hawks, raptors, they can see far off with really good binocular vision. They can see what we would need a telescope to see. They can see 8 to 10 times what we can see. So what is that far off vision? They wanted to know, like, what's the skill? Like, what can we do to be able to not literally see physically with a telescope, but what can we learn from that far off vision? Or the ants, right? They can carry 10 times their weight, 20 times their weight. And if something gets in their way, they'll lie down their life in the way and make a bridge for the next bunch to be able to come and walk over top of them to get to where they need to go. Now that's dedication. Or the honeybees, right? The honeybees, they have an intricate community. They all cooperate together. But when they get to a certain stage, they know that it's time to break off and create another community. And so some of the bees will leave and go off and create a new hive. And there's a critical mass, a critical amount of bees that it requires to be able to form another hive. And they knew that. And they always do it, all of them. So the native people wanted to know these kind of skills. And sometimes they would mimic the animals in nature. So say, we've talked about the raptors and the eagles, but what about the owls? Owls are really interesting because they use what we would call peripheral vision. So they look straight ahead. They're always looking straight ahead, but they don't actually move their heads when they want to see something. What they do is, as they're looking at something in front of them, they also will widen their gaze so that they can see both what's in front and what's to the side at the same time. Try that. See if you can do it. If you look at something in front of you, see how far you can bring your hands to the side, and how much can you keep looking at your hands? How far back can you bring your hands and still be able to see them with your peripheral vision? Right? Pretty far. Birds have eyes on the side of their head, a lot of them, not owls, but some birds. So they can see almost 240 degrees. So that's another skill. But with the owl eyes, the native scouts would sit and they would watch what was going on around them, and they would practice peripheral vision. And it was like a meditation. And they would bring other senses in, and involve other senses as well, other senses that other animals had. And when they would do this, it was mindfulness. And it brought them into what some people call the zone, right? It means basically that you can be in the right place at the right time. You know what needs to happen, and you're right there. That comes from that observation in nature. And because of that, they were able to interact with nature very exactingly and very well. But okay, so why do we need that skill now? Right? We have our phones. Our phones can tell us. They've got weather apps. We've got a GPS. We can't really get lost. You know, we can go to the grocery store. And in fact, even before we get to the grocery store, I know in America, if you want to go to the grocery store, you can actually look on your phone, find out whether they have what you want, what aisle it's in, and how much it costs. So why do we need this zone, the owl eye zone, right? Why do we need it now? Well, I'm going to say that it's still important, even though we have our cell phones, because cell phones can make us myopic. We can get so dependent on them that we're not paying attention to what's going on around us. And yes, literally staring at your cell phone all day will make you myopic. You will need glasses. You need to stop and take a break and look far off into the distance every once in a while, or else the curvature of your eyes will get so used to focusing on something small that you literally won't be able to see anything else. So you'll need glasses. Now, we don't want to be myopic, right? What is myopic? If you want to look at it from a larger definition, it means lacking awareness, lacking creativity, lacking foresight. We don't want to be that person. I mean, that's a skill, okay? That's a mouse medicine. To be able to look in a very narrow, small space and understand exactly what's going on in there. That's important. We need to do that sometimes, but not all the time. Right? So basically, we don't want to be cell phoned. We want to be self-owned. We want to be in charge of ourselves. This is important. And we should consider how we're using technology. I want to tell you a little bit about a woman named Rachel Carson. She was a prominent figure in the environmental movement back in the 1960s. She grew up having a love of nature, and she would always sit outside, even as a little child, and listen to the birds, watch the frogs, watch the stars at night, see the seasons change. And this was important to her. And she grew up and she got a job in the Fish and Wildlife Service in the United States as an agency that's in charge of making sure that the native populations of wild animals are not getting over harvested by hunting, or that maybe there's too many of them, and so they maybe need to let some more hunting licenses in, let people hunt a little more of them. Or sometimes you have to make sure that the fish are not having a problem from pollution or erosion of the water or mining or something that can affect the water quality. So they have to keep an eye on all these things and see if there's any support systems that need to be put in place to take care of the wild animals and the fish, which is a resource for the humans. So Rachel Carson noticed one year that they were spraying pesticides in her backyard, like right over top of her house, on her lawn, right over her house. And she really didn't like it. And she thought, what is this? I don't think that this is necessary. But what they were doing was they were spraying for mosquitoes. And they were spraying a pesticide called DDT, which is really, it's a neurotoxin. And it's a endocrine inhibitor disruptor, right? And she thought, if it's killing mosquitoes, it's probably not good for us. And she was concerned about it. And as she went along throughout the year, she noticed that in that spring, following the spraying, it was really quiet. Now, generally in spring, the animals are all excited, right? This is mating season. The birds are singing their love songs, and the frogs are singing their calling songs to each other, calling each other from far away to come together and get together. Everybody's having a party. It's a fun time, springtime. We feel it too. It's warm. We want to get to know our friends. We want to see them again. We haven't been able to see them. I guess for you it would be the rainy season. And after the rainy season is over, then you can go out and see your friends, and so you're excited. So now she noticed, though, that there was just not a lot of sounds coming from the animals. And she was really concerned about it, and she thought, this isn't good. And she was watching the birds in her own backyard, and she noticed that there were not hatching babies. The hatchlings were just not able to get out of the eggs. And she went and investigated. Like, she actually got a ladder and went up on her, under the eaves of her roof, and she went to see what's going on in the nest. And there she took apart the birds had just abandoned the eggs, and the eggs hadn't hatched, and she checked them out, and they were rubbery. This was the effect of DDT. So the birds were eating worms or whatever they were eating that was contacting the DDT in the soil and the environment and the insects, and then it was coming into the birds and their reproductive systems, and the effect was that was making the eggs shells were soft and spongy and rubbery, and so the babies couldn't get out of their eggs. They were trapped. And this is horrifying, right? You're killing out an entire species like this. And so what she did, she was thinking, well, okay, I know I work for the Fish and Wildlife Service, but, I'm one person. What can I do about this? The indicator species are here. The insects, the soft-bodied amphibians like the frogs and the salamanders, worms even, although they're not amphibians, but these are soft-bodied creatures, and the birds. So these are the ones that reproduce quickly, and you can study them pretty easily. They're loud. They're making calls. They're calling to each other. Now suddenly they're not. Okay, so it's pretty easy to figure out what's happening with them. They're in trouble. So they're telling us that there could be a problem with our health. And our reproduction cycle is a lot longer. It's going to take us 20 years before we're going to see problems with our children, whether their children are having problems. It's going to be a while. But with these animals, it's every year. So you're going to see a new generation every year. And there's a problem here. And so she thought, okay, what can I do? We need to get legislation passed to get this stuff, to get the industries to stop spraying this. The government was in charge of these sprayings in some cases. And there were signs, the advertising was DDT, it's good for me, right? People were spraying it themselves on their lawns. They thought this was the best stuff ever since sliced bread. And, the people themselves were all into this. And how is she going to convince people that this wasn't good? So she's a really smart lady. She was taking the advice of a thinker in the United States. His name was Buckminster Fuller. Really brilliant man. And he was saying that this one thing, if you want to change the direction of this state, it's like an ocean liner. If you want to change the direction of an ocean liner, right, what do? You have to turn the rudder. But these things are like giant cities. How can you possibly even move the rudder? I mean, just to do that, it's humongous. It's a couple stories. And it's too hard for one person to just, come on a wheel and turn that thing. It's just, you can't do it. So what they have is on the big rudder, there's another small rudder at the very bottom. And once that rudder gets going, then you can slowly turn the rudder of the ship. And that will in turn turn the ship itself. So for the ship of state, you have to figure out, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, the little tiny rudder, that's called a trim tab, right? The trim tab is a little rudder on the big rudder. So you have to find out what are the trim tabs on the ship of state. So it's like, okay, so you guys are all taking trigonometry, I'm assuming, and you've heard about, the inflection point. And that's when, the slope changes, right? The function of the curve is changing from one way to the other way. And so, the function is changing, and that is an inflection point. We got to figure out what is the inflection point for society. What's the inflection point for history? This woman figured out the inflection point for history. So she had to think about this. Okay, this is pre-internet. We didn't have Instagram. We didn't have Twitter. Right? So what did she do? How can we get the legislators to act? So in those days, and it may be still true, you can write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper. Now the legislators they can't do everything themselves. They have aides that will be following these things. What are the people saying? They want to know because, of course, they're getting voted in, so they have to know what's popular on those days and what are people upset about. So when people are writing letters to the editor about something, if it's something that affects legislation, they pay attention. She also got on radio shows, and she would get interviewed on radio shows about, DDT, and is it safe and is it not, and what are the studies, and why aren't there any studies, She also would go to social clubs. I don't know what your corollary is. In America, we have things like the Rotary Club, social clubs where people all get together, not exactly like church or a temple, but just social clubs, or maybe even hiking clubs or environmental clubs, those kind of things. But she went further into the society of, people's clubs, and she would go and give talks, and she would say, hey, look, this is going to harm our children. We have to pay attention to this. And she gathered an army of housewives and regular people and asked them to be citizen scientists. She wanted them to gather information. We need to record what's going on in our own backyard. We need to be able to see how many birds were there last year versus this year. What are your memories? If you put out, in America, we feed the birds. It's a big industry. Everything becomes an industry in America. Whatever people possibly want to do, they've got an industry for it. So growing bird seed is a big deal. And people were making bird feeders, and they would put them out and fill them up with bird seed. And they would count how many birds are coming to your bird feeder. Okay, which species are coming to your bird feeder? Okay, we have chickadees, cardinals, robins, red-winged blackbirds, sparrows. These are the things that we have in America. In my backyard right now, blue jays, these kind of things, crows. So how many birds are coming to your feeder? What species are coming? And in each species, how many of those are coming? Write it down every day. They call a bird count. How many frogs? How loud is you can't go out and catch the frogs, figure that out with the flashlights in the dark, but they would say, okay, how loud are the frogs? What's the decibel rating of the frogs? You can rate those things. And she had people go out and map their backyards, literally figure out where are the bird nests in your yard. In America, it's a thing, you have you have your house, and then around your house you have a little yard, and there's always one tree in your yard, and maybe you have a fence around it. And so there's typical places where the birds might be. They could be on your, like under the eaves of your roof. They could be in that tree. Maybe you have a couple bushes around the outside of your house. So you typically know where you're going to find the birds. It's pretty static what American suburbia looks like, but this is what she was getting people to do. So get a ladder, go look out, on your roof, see what's going on. How many birds are you finding? This army of scientists got so much information. They were able to prove there has been a drastic reduction in the indicator species. The numbers of the indicator species, they are in danger. This is going to harm us. We need to do something. And she wrote a book. The book was called Silent Spring. And at this point, she had so much support that Congress had to act. And they actually created a regulatory agency, which is called the EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency. And the Environmental Protection Agency was, the first job they had was go out and figure out what's going on with DDT. Is it really a problem or not? Go study it. Make some scientific studies beyond what these backyard people are doing. And they did. They found out that this is dangerous stuff, and they had to ban it. And that was, I think, 1970. Or 1972. So they banned it in the U.S. from being sold, from being used in the U.S. But of course, they were still exporting it in America. Anyhow, she changed public policy because she knew how to push those trim tabs. And it's amazing. It's an amazing story. And what's interesting is that we find that 3 generations later, they're finding that there are still issues coming out with that 3rd generation of humans that are being affected by the DDT that was sprayed back in the 1960s. Okay. So, this is amazing. And it's all because one person acted, but it was not anybody. It was a person who knew about meditating in nature. She knew how to observe nature, how to be in that zone, how to be in the right place at the right time, how to use those owl eyes. She might not have specifically been doing that, but she was utilizing the same kinds of techniques that indigenous people would use in order to be able to safeguard their communities. And it came from observation of nature. So I'm going to ask you, have I convinced you yet that one person can make a difference? I'm going to give you a challenge. Okay, before we have session 2. In session 2, we'll learn a lot more about different kinds of skills that the indigenous people used. And we'll learn some more about other people that observed nature and the wonderful things that they did. But my challenge to you is, can you find a spot in nature and sit there for 5 minutes a day and use your owl eyes? Use your peripheral vision. Look at something, but also look around you. Look with wider eyes and see what you notice. And okay, so if you don't have a place in nature, I don't know what your situation is, maybe you're in a city. If you don't have that place, you can also use owl eyes, even while walking. It's a mindfulness practice. Don't hurt yourself, of course. Maybe on a quiet walk somewhere where it's not too busy. But try to be in a peaceful state of mind somewhere, whether you're sitting or you're walking, and just notice the surroundings. Be in peripheral vision and see what changes, how the birds respond to you differently. It might take a while. Oh yeah, I want to tell you, try to do it in the same place every day. It's really important. Like these people that we were talking about, they were mapping their own backyard. So we want to be in the same place so that those individual birds and animals that might be there will get to know us, and they get used to us. They'll see us as their neighbor, and we'll see them as our neighbors. So in this way, I'm inviting you to become a change agent. I'd like you to please leave some comments in the chat and tell me what it is that you're interested in so I can make session 2 as tailored to your interests as possible. And I hope you enjoyed our session today. Take care and have fun at your next session. Bye-bye.